going to do is give their national perspective and updates around transition and those items and things that are available for students with disability in the field. So they're going to come forward and just give their national perspective. We have our first speaker will be Renee Comito. She's from the National Longitudinal Transition Survey 2 and SRI International. Our second speaker on the panel will be David Tess, and he's from the National Secondary Transition Technical Assistance Center from the University of North Carolina in Charlotte. Our third and final speaker today for this session will be Meg Griegel, and she's from Think College Initiatives at the University of Massachusetts in Boston. Without further ado, Renee.
Okay, can you hear me? So I'm going to try to rush through a set of slides. I'll be speaking at least as fast as David Conley and maybe a little bit faster. So this is a presentation on just a few highlights and results from the National Longitudinal Transition Study. I'm not quite sure how that works, so we're going to try this. Just briefly, this study is funded by the U.S. Department of Education. There was an original study conducted back in the late 80s, early 90s. This study was a 10-year study that began when we selected a cohort of students, over 11,000 of them. They were between the ages of 13 and 16 in December of 2000, and we followed them for 10 years. So that meant that we collected information about them during their school careers and then out into their post-secondary life and a transition to adulthood. It's representative of students with disabilities in this age cohort nationally. So that means that there were school districts from every state that were involved. Those that agreed to participate provided us with rosters, and we selected students across the disability categories and in that age range. Today the data will come from both parent and youth telephone interviews and questionnaires, surveys from school programs, from students' teachers, and from their transcripts. So first of all, course taking. I think this is what David Conley referred to as preparedness. Here you'll see slides where the red represents students with disabilities, the blue are students in the general education student population. So right away, and this is credits earned Carnegie units, typically 4 per year, with a total of 24. And so you can see right away that students with disabilities in special education are not earning the credits that students in the general population are. This particularly occurs in the academic area. You can see that just under 13 credits for students in special ed and just over 16 for students in the general population. On the other hand, students in special ed are earning more credits in VOC, vocational education, and other kinds of courses, anything that's not VOC or academic. And you can't obviously make any sense of specific disability categories here, but the point is that this course-taking profiles vary across for students in different disability categories. Probably the most notable in the academic area is that students with mental retardation or intellectual disability and emotional disturbance are the least likely to complete academic courses. And what are those academic courses? Well, actually, in just about every year, every student takes English, and there are no differences between students in special ed and general ed populations. But when we start to look at math, science, social studies, foreign language, students from special education are earning fewer credits in all of these areas. It is worth saying here, however, that when this data is compared with similar data from the first national longitudinal study, that there are radical and statistically significant increases in the kinds of courses that students in special education are taking. So much more math, much more science, much more social studies than 2 decades ago. So there has been an incredible improvement in the education of students with disabilities over that time frame. However, relative to their peers in general education, they're still not earning the kinds of credits that potentially they could. And where are they earning those credits? The first column here indicates in a special ed setting versus a gen ed setting. And so you can see here that whether we're talking all credits, academics, voc, or non-academic, it's in a general ed setting. About two-third, one-third relationship in academics, and 20% to 80% in the other kinds of courses. So these students are gen ed students first. When they're in those gen ed academic courses, about a third, 35%, have the same kind of curriculum, no modification, but over half have some modifications, and then smaller percentages have significant to specialized curriculums. And I'm not going to go into these slides here in any detail, but here on the participation and here in the kinds of instructional groupings that you see in your slides, you can look at them in greater detail and sort them out. But this is slides that show the difference between students in a gen ed classroom, the whole class, what their experience is, and then what a particular student with a disability in that class is. And essentially what all of these bars boil down to is that students are not engaged in the same kind of question and answer interaction with the gen ed teacher to the same extent that their gen ed peers are, that they're more likely to have interactions with aides, more one-on-one, less small group experience, and less presentation in front of the classroom. So there is a difference in the level of engagement of students in inclusive gen ed academic classes. I'm going to skip that one and rush on now to post-secondary ed work and preparation for work. And so these slides show progression over the at least the last 4 waves of data collection when students were matriculating out into adult life. And so these show post-secondary ed enrollment. The blue line at the bottom are at the point of interview, which was in 2003, 5, 7, and 9. And so attendance in post-secondary ed institutions of all types was at 20, 24, 20, 15. But cumulatively, over time, it has risen to about 60% of students of that cohort of 13 to 16-year-olds back in 2000 have gone on to post-secondary education. So the majority of students in special ed are becoming engaged in some kind of post-secondary ed experience. And those are typically 3 types. Most likely to attend are that top blue bar are 2-year colleges, rising to 44% cumulatively over time. Next most popular is the Voc Tech business type school. Most recently, about a third of students pursuing some kind of program there, and 20% now have pursued a 4-year degree. This is a slide not so much about the preparedness, that Conley was referring to and the kind of coursework that students are taking, but this is about maybe some kind of readiness. So the blue bar here shows that students who go on to post-secondary education, 87% of them have received accommodations of some kind in their high school experience. When we ask them this question, some people have a disability or special need that makes it hard for them to do some things. Do you consider yourself to have any kind of disability or special need? 37% of them said that they did. But here, 63%, this first red bar, did not consider themselves to have a disability. You cannot get services in a post-secondary education institution without disclosing that you have a disability and specific needs related to that. So 9% thought they had a disability, didn't tell their schools, and only 28% disclosed to the school, and those students got what they needed. Most students who don't get what they need wish they had. I don't have slides about that. But how do they finish up? 52% in the, here again, blue bars are gen ed, general population students. 52% of students complete their degree, whatever kind of an institution they're in. And the red bars are students with special ed backgrounds. 41% are completing. And you can see that in Voc Tech, that it's a 65-57 relationship. And then down the bottom set of bars in 4 years, many more students in the general population completing than the third of those who go on completing four-year colleges. But look at two-year college. So not only is two-year college the most popular place to attend, but it's the site where students with special needs can be successful, and twice as many are finishing those kinds of certificate programs than students in the general population. So that's special ed. Am I out of time? Okay. You'll have to look at the employment stuff later. Thanks. What? Take a minute. Just quickly to show you here that employment has been rising. Cumulatively, 90% of students have had some employment experience, but in 2009, at the time of interview, the rate of employment went down, and you can see relative to students in the gen ed general population, it's lower than that. Full-time work is rising, wages are rising, and this slide, I think, shows you that in some, if you look at education and training or STEM, that you don't get employed early on without high school completion, but if you complete post-secondary school, you're much more likely to get those kinds of jobs. Then look at building and grounds. That's the kind of work that a majority of high school non-completers can look forward to, or those sorts of things. And again, the same issues about disclosing of disabilities and getting the supports that you need on the job. You'll only get it if you disclose. About the same, 1/4 of students are disclosing, and those are the students and young people who have the most obvious disabilities, the students with visual or sensory impairments or physical impairments. They can't escape it. But those with invisible disabilities are the ones that need that support to advocate, to self-advocate more than others. And then lastly, just to wrap up, seeing engagement over time with post-secondary ed, employment, and job training, increasing cumulatively. Lots of kids out there with some experiences, but it's flattened out with, the, I think, with our economy flattening out to about 65%.
Morning. I'm the Dave that no one will ever call scary smart. Scary maybe, but never scary smart. I'm this guy. I'm a co-director of NSTAC, the National Secondary Transition Technical Assistance Center. My co-director is Paula Kohler at Western Michigan University. And we're an OSEP-funded TA&D center focusing on secondary transition. One of the tasks that we do is to do what the earlier speakers were talking about when they were talking about teach them well and teach them the good stuff, those to me mean evidence-based practices. Are we making sure that teachers are using those practices in their classrooms? And that's one of the tasks of NSTAC over the past few years, has been to look at what are evidence-based practices in for teachers, what can they use in their classroom, and then also evidence-based predictors, and I'll talk about those differently. But evidence-based practice has gotten it's only been out a few years, and it's already like best practices where it means a variety of different things to everybody. So I liken it to a Chinese menu where if you pick one term from column A, one from column B, one from column C, you'll hear it called those things. But that's really not what it means, and you need to attend that green line at the bottom. It's the procedures. How did they determine it was an evidence-based practice? And you need to be asking those things. How do we define it? This is the way we define it. And when we're talking about evidence, when NSTAC talks about evidence-based practice, we're talking about the top red bar. They're rigorous research designs, whether they be experimental or correlational. They've demonstrated a record of success, and they've undergone a systematic review. And that systematic review is what our graduate assistants do all the time, is they do the systematic reviews. We use a set of criteria. These are the criteria for single subject designs, single subject experimental designs. And so it's got to meet these criteria. We have one for experimental and we have one for correlational research. Once you determine whether you've got a high quality study, then you determine the level of evidence that you have, and you need a number of high quality studies to be evidence based. So that's the process that everything that I will talk to you about in the next 7 minutes and 16 seconds are based on these kind of criteria. What have we done? Well, we use Kohler's taxonomy, and that makes sense because she's our co-director. And we divide our practices into categories. And student-focused planning is student involvement in the IEP process. Student development is the skill, teaching them skills. Family involvement is just family involvement. Program structure is the things that you have to do as a program to allow the other things to happen. There's actually 5 categories. And the 5th category is interagency collaboration, and it's not here because there are no evidence-based practices that we've found. And really that makes sense because that's a really hard area to do experimental research in. But we've identified 63 evidence-based practices so far. And now it's up to the researchers to do the rest. These are just some examples. And if you go on the website, and I'll show you how to do that, these are just some of those practices that are available. And we do them by the skill taught because most teachers are interested in teaching skills. They don't come down on Monday morning and say, I want to do some time delay or maybe some peer-assisted instruction. It's that I need to teach academics, I need to teach grocery shopping skills, so it focuses on the skills being taught. Our practice descriptions include, on the website include what is the evidence base, who's it implemented with, because teachers always want to know, will this work with my kids? What is the practice? How has it been implemented? Where has it been implemented? What is it in relation to indicator 13, those SPP, APR things that they have to do? What are the common core standards? We used to link it to just sort of the national standards, but the common core is the best place to do that now. And then where's the best place to find out how to do this? And those are the research to practice lesson plan links. Those research to lesson plan starters from each of the studies that we use to identify the evidence-based practices, we pulled out the information that no matter what type of lesson plan your school system requires you to write, and they vary from school system to school system and from state to state, you'll need an objective, you'll need the setting of materials, you need the content taught, you'll need the teaching procedures, and you'll need a way to evaluate whether the students learned a skill or not. So those are the things that we pull out, and those are in the lesson plan starters. You can find these on our website, www.nstac.org. They're under evidence-based practices in the suite, and the evidence-based practices, you can get those through the sidebar. Then you come to how they're categorized. No, I have 4 minutes and 30 seconds. And the evidence-based, then the research, we have the research practice lesson plan starters can be gotten through also through the library, and they're all categorized in the library, which are again in that suite. And here's the library. How does it apply at the student level? We think it helps, once you know the goals and IEP goals and objectives, then you need to have some instructional strategies. You can go to the lesson plan library. The missing link here is, how do these, if you teach these kids these skills, do they get better post-school outcomes? Well, the experimental research isn't designed to do that, but the correlational research is. So we went back to the research and looked at things that correlated with the primary indicators for indicator 14, the post-school outcomes indicator. And there are actually now 17. Those of you who are in transition have been hearing me talk about 16. We just added a 17th student involved in the IEP, thanks to Mary Morningstar's study that linked it to independent living, better independent living outcomes. But the X's here mean that there's research to back it. The empty squares are for researchers saying we need research to demonstrate whether, to know whether these things that happen, if these things happen to kids in schools, will they have better post-school outcomes in these areas. If there's a missing X, doesn't mean that it's not there, it just means there's no research yet to demonstrate that. So there's the student involved in the IEP is the 17th one, so now there's 17. We think that these can be used to improve transition services. You've got a vast array of potential transition services that you can put into an IEP. I would suggest going with these to give you the biggest bang for the buck. We put this also into a sort of an assessment that you can use, as schools or states can use to look at what's going on in terms of transition practices. And we think that using these predictors give your students the best chance of success. And this is an example of that predictor assessment. Then we've got the super table, and we're really sort of just messing with this because we don't do this systematically. We just, as we find stuff, we add it. And this looks not only for students with disabilities, but students without disabilities, students at risk, and students with mental health issues. And it also looks at predictors of in-school success and predictors of post-school success. The predictors of in-school success come from the papers, some of the papers that you may have read on the way up here on the plane. The Breaking Ranks 2 stuff and the National High School Center, what are the things that predict better in-school success, and the post-school, then the predictors of post-school success are basically the 17 ANSTAC predictors. And